here. Last week we were looking in the Gemara, and we saw how the right. So the Gemara says, in order to understand our Mishnah, we really have to understand Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer based on other Tannaitic sources, because our Mishnah is incomplete. And it uses this interesting term. It says that the Mishnah is only a mitankanta. It's only something that's mitukan if we take into account what's in these other sources, because the Mishnah is leaving out, it's obviously leaving out information. It's not giving us all of the korbanot and avodot that we would need to know in order to have the Mishnah make sense. One of the things that Tosfot points out is it's an interesting term, because in many other instances, when talking about a Mishnah, or more likely a Braita, when there is something wrong with it, then the Gemara calls it a mishabeshta. It's something that's mishubash. It's mistaken, or it's confused or mixed up. And in here, I think it's Rava, right, who says that in order for it to be a mitankante, puts it in a positive way. So Tosfos' diuk is that the Mishnah is not mishubeshet. In other words, it's not that there's incorrect information in the Mishnah. It's just not fully fleshed out. I don't think we're going to go through the Tosfot. Tosfot disagrees with Rashi about some aspects of the way Rashi understands the order. But for our purposes, I decided we're going to stick mainly to Rashi's pshat. But last week, when we were doing the Gemara, which I'll look at again, the order that we came out with is this one which is on the screen now. And this is what I've marked as Rabbi Akiva the Tosefta Rambam. It's sheet number 5. The Rambam holds like the way we learned the Gemara. And just to review quickly, and also for those of you who did open and look at the charts, so I didn't make a little mafteach, but I think you understand that the things that I marked in green are the korbanot or avodot that are done every day. The ones that are in red are the ones that are particular to Yom Kippur, and the ones that are in blue are the korbanot musaf. Now, one of the things that I need to point out here, and I'm still working on this actually, and you'll see why when we get a little bit further in the Gemara. We mentioned that in this, what I have listed here in the chart is El Ha'am. According to both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, that's the same ayil that's mentioned in Parshat Pinchas as one of the korbanot musaf. So, but I have it listed here in red. I was thinking I should put it in purple, like do the blue and the red together, and I may still change that. That it's a kind of a pivotal question. It becomes part of this question. But let's say looking at what we have now, this is where we were up to in the Gemara. So the day would start with the Korban Tamid, and then I added that, of course, this would also include other avodot like the Ketoret and the Neirot. And then the Par and the Shivat HaKvasim of Musaf. And then all of that would be done on the Tvila Rishona, right? The first time he goes to the mikvah, the Kohen Gadol goes to the mikvah and puts on the Bigdei Zahav. Then he would change and do the second Tvilah, and he'll wear the Bigdei Lavan. And for the Bigdei Lavan, he does the Par Kohen and the Seir Ha'am. And those are the Chatat, those are the Chataot, where the blood is taken and sprinkled in the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodeshim. Then he would do the Tvilah Shlishit, go back to the Bigdei Zahav. He would do the Seir HaNaseh B'chutz, which is a Korban Chatat, and is one of the Korbanot Musaf. So of course we have the question, why wasn't that part of the Musaf in the morning? Why was that separated out and done later? But he would do that, and then he would do the El Kohen and El Ha'am, and the Emurei Chatat. So the Emurei Chatat, just to remind you, those were the Emurim, the fats from the Korbanot Chatat that he brought in the Bigdei Lavan. Those would then be burnt on the Mizbeach. And while he's still in the Bigdei Zahav, he would bring the Olat Tamid of Ben Harabayim. That's the Keves Olat Tamid. Then, and it's this point, this is how we read the Gemara. And then after that, he would change again into the Bigdei Lavan, take out the Kafu Machteh from the Kodesh HaKodeshim. He would change, and that's the only avodah. This is also interesting because removing the kaf and the machteh from the Kodesh HaKodeshim has the status of an avodah. It can be an avodah by itself. You might think it's just sort of cleaning up after himself, but it has its own status. The Torah seems to go out of its way to tell us this, even though the Torah doesn't use that language, and we'll get back to that. Then he tavels again, he puts on the Bigdei Zahav, and the only things that are left for him to do now are the process of the Tamid, which, to finish off, now he'll do the Ketoret and the Neirot. We read Rashi, and Rashi changes. In other words, what I should point out is what's done here in the Tvilah Shlishit, in the Bigdei Zahav and beyond. This is a machloket between Rashi and the Rambam, right? So what I read to you now, this is the Rambam's understanding, and in Rashi's understanding, so everything is the same, except for the Korban Tamid Ben Harabayim, where Rashi says that was done in the Tvilah Chamishit. That was done after he did the Hotzat Kafu Machter, and then he would do the Ketoret and Neirot. So that's the difference between sheet 5 and sheet 6. That changes. So I think Michael Werner asked in the last, he asked in the last shiur, what is this all about? Like, what are all of these things about? And there will be, I was thinking about this, I think there are two ways of looking at the importance of the order. So one of them is broadly speaking, if we take the categories that I've set up, that's one way to look at it. So we have 3 categories of korbanot and avodot: the things that are done every day, the korbanot musaf, and the things that are particular to Yom Kippur. And then, so that would be one way of approaching it, is to take them as categories, understand why certain categories precede or come after other categories. And as we see, the one that's most fraught, as it were, is the Korban Musaf. The Korban Musaf is the most difficult one to put together, as it were. And then the other thing would be to look at each Korban unto itself and to understand what the significance of each particular Korban is. Now, part of that we are going to get into, specifically the Sir Ha'am, which is also called the Sir Hanaseh Bifnim, and the Sir Hanaseh B'chutz, which is the Korban Chatat of the Musaf. The Gemara is going to touch on that, and I think we'll get to it today. But those are things to consider. Yeah, okay, we're going to leave Rabbi Eliezer for the time being. Let's go back to, oh, I closed that by accident. Hold on. No, I didn't. Hold on a second here. Let's go back to, yes.
Okay. Isn't it strange that you insert two korbanot of Yom Kippur in the middle of the korbanot of Musaf? That looks, I don't know.
No, but so
well,
that
I can't, of course.
So, you know what? Well, let's stay on the chart for a minute, and then we'll go back to the. What I want you to understand. I mean, this was the way I used the terminology in my chart. It was for convenience, but remember, if you're looking at the charts. So the Tevilah Shniya, the first time he puts on the Bigdei Lavan, so what does he do? The Par Kohen and the Sir Ha'am. This is what the Gemara calls Avodat Hayom. This is the service of the day. So in a sense, this is
the Yom Kippur, of Yom Kippur.
Right.
Yoma, okay.
Right. Okay, Michael, thank you I got your message. That's fine. Thank you for letting me know. So in a sense, when we think about the Korbanot Tamid and the Korbanot Musaf, they are, I don't want to say secondary, but they're not sort of they're not the main focus of this day. Right, because we have Korbanot Tamid and we have Korbanot Musaf all the time, right?
On Shabbat and Chag.
Right, have on Shabbat and Chag. So we have those every week, and then we have them more than every week because we also have them on the Regalim, and we have them on Rosh Hashanah, and so those are frequent. By the way, one of the other, now that I'm saying that, one of the other things I was thinking about as I was doing this is when we get into this whole machloket about the order of things, one of the things that's quite interesting is that there's a general rule which we've mentioned before, and that I think you're all familiar with, which is tadir v'sheino tadir koder, right? Something that is frequent and something is less frequent. The one that is more frequent comes first. Now here, I think that if we were to use that rule, then it would be simple. It would be that we would do the Korban Tamid, we would do all of the Korbanot Musaf, right? Because those are more frequent than Yom Kippur, which only comes once a year. Then we would do all the things that are pertinent to Yom Kippur. And of course, we would finish with the Korban Tamid because that's also only Bein Ha'arbaim, and it's also the last korban that has to be brought for the day, which we learn out elsewhere.
That would make sense.
Right. That would make sense. That it would make things, in a sense, easier. But I think the reason that this klal, this general rule, doesn't apply here is that's klalim, and this it's a little repetitive, but klalim, generally speaking, are applied when we have no other mandate or no other imperative. So if we're not sure what to do, then we'll revert to the klal. And here, even though it looks like we're not sure what to do, but here we have other factors. So as I talked about last week, what are the other factors? We read Parshat Achrei Mot, and it gives us a series of things to do. And we read Parshat Pinchas and the Korbanot Musaf, and it gives us other things to do, including the Korban Tamid and the Korban Musaf. And also, as we pointed out, the Parshat Pinchas alludes to Parshat Achrei Mot, according to at least one dayah. That when it says milvad, or even in Pshuto Shel Mikra, it says milvad. What is it? Milvad Olat Kippurim, right? The psukim themselves are indicating that they're conscious of each other, and that there is some kind of an order that we have to maintain. The other layer that we have to add on is that there was this tradition that was agreed upon by everybody that on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol is going to go to the mikveh 5 times and change his clothes each time. So he's going to wear Bigdei Zahav 3 times and Bigdei Lavan 2 times. That's another layer that we have to add in. And there was one other thing which I can't remember right now. So yes, so all of these things are coming into play, and that's how it gets difficult. The other thing I pointed out also in Parshat Pinchas, which is also interesting, when it brings the Korbanot Musaf. So it mentions there's a par, an ayil, and shivat kvasim, which are all olot, and then it skips a few psukim, and then it ends off by saying, and that there's also a sir chatat. So if I'm learning just Parshat Pinchas, I also have to ask myself, why is the sir chatat separated from the korbanot olah that are mentioned? And in some ways, these different dayot, these different approaches, seem to come, at least in part, to try to make better sense of that. Okay, so with all of that said, oops, that's not what I wanted. Hold on a second. There we go. Let's look at the Gemara. Yeah. Okay. I'll figure that out later. Okay, so what did we say in the Gemara? So the Gemara asks this. Gemara, there's our Mishnah, and in the Mishnah it says, when he puts on the Bigdei Zahav for the second time, right? So then he goes on, he does his ayil in the El Ha'am, that Shivat Kvasim Tamimin B'nei Shana. And that's when he does the Shivat Kvasim from Musaf, according to Rabbi Eliezer. And according to Rabbi Akiva, he says, the Shivat Kvasim were brought with Tamid Shel Shachar, Ufar Ha'olah, and the Gemara is not sure if Far Ha'olah means that's also brought with Tamid Shel Shachar, or if it's in the part of the next stitch, which is Usir HaNaseh B'chutz in Tamid Shel Ben Harabayim, that the Sir Naseh B'chutz and the Far Ha'olah are done with Tamid Shel Ben Harabayim. So the Gemara asks all these questions to understand, how do we understand Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer? And so the Gemara says, Rava says, Lo mashkachat la matkanta ela ola Rabbi Eliezer tetana Beishuel or Rabbi Akiva kitato sefto. So we won't be able to find find this, like put this together in an orderly fashion, except if we look at the way Rabbi Eliezer is brought down, and according to Tana de Shmuel, or according to Rabbi Akiva, as he's found in the Tosefta. Sorry, 1 second. Oof. All right. I'm sorry, hang on 1 second. I have to close that out and bring it up again. Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay. All right. So first we explain Rabbi Eliezer. Tana de Shmuel. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yatzav Yasai Lo Be'el Ha'am Ve'Murechatat. He goes out. In other words, when does he go out? He goes out after he's tavled for the Bigdei Zahav. This is his third tefillah, and he's put on the Bigdei Zahav for the second time. He goes out and he does Elo Ve'el Ha'am from Achrei Mot, Ve'emurei Chatat, and that's also when he burns the Emurim from the Korbanot Chatat, the par and the seer that he did for Yom Kippur. That's when he burns them on the Mizbeach. Of Par Ha'olah, V'shivat Kvasim, Usir Hanaseh Bechutz, Im Tamid Shel Ben Arbai. Right, so Par Ha'olah, Shivat Kvasim, Usir Hanaseh Bechutz, those are the Korbanot Musaf. Those are all the Korbanot Musaf. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, on this day, Musaf is going to be done at the end of the day with Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, and not in the morning with Tamid Shel Shachar. The Gemara will talk about the reasons for Rabbi Eliezer in a moment. Rabbi Akiva, the Tosefta Maihi, the Tanya, Rabbi Akiva, Omer Para Olah, V'Shivat Kvasim, Tamid Shel Shachar Hayu Krevi. So the Par Ha'olah Shivat Kvasim, which are part of the Korban Musaf, right? Those are the first two elements that we're going to bring from the Korban Musaf. Those were brought with Tamid Shel Shachar. Shenemar Milvad Olat HaBoker Sheli Olat HaTamid. So Rabbi Akiva brings a proof text, and we discussed this last time. The proof text is not necessarily obvious because this pasuk, it's in Parshat Pinchas, but it's in the parsha that's actually talking about the Musaf for Pesach. But it implies that the Korban Musaf of Pesach, and it's then understood for all of the Regalim, is going to be done immediately after the Korban Tamid. That's the implication. Milvad Olat HaBoker Sheli Olat HaTamid. Aside from the Olat HaBoker, meaning aside from the Olat HaBoker, which obviously we're going to do before these, then right after them we're going to do the Korban Musaf. So if we only have that pasuk, then I'd say let's do all of the Korbanot Musaf right after the Tamid Shel Shachar. But he goes on to say, after you do the Par Ha'olah and Shivat Kvasim, then you do Avodat Hayom, which again I pointed out is the Par HaChatat and the Sir Chatat that's specific to Yom Kippur, where he's going to take the blood and sprinkle it inside. And only then will he do the Sir Naseh B'chutz, which is the Chatat of the Musaf. Why wasn't that done with the other Korbanot Musaf? Shene'amar Sir Izim Echad Chatat Milvad Chatat HaKippurim. So you have to bring that in Pinchas, in the parsha of Yom Kippur, the Musaf for Yom Kippur, when it says that you need to bring a Sir Izim Chatat, it says the Sir Izim, you you bring as a chatat aside from the chatata kippurim. So it's referring back to the chatata kippurim. So what's the chatata kippurim? Which is
the par and the seer ha'am.
Right. So the chatata kippurim is going to be either one or both of the chataot that are specific to Yom Kippur. So since it says that the seir izim echad chatat, what we are calling the seir hanaseh b'chutz, since it says that's done milvad chatata kippurim, so just like milvad before meant that whatever comes after the milvad means that that was done prior to the korban we're doing now. So here also, sirizim echad chatat is going to be done after we did chatata kippurim. That chatata kippurim has to be prior to that. So according to Rabbi Akiva's understanding, it's the Torah itself that separated the sir naseh b'chutz from the other elements of the korban musaf. And it says that it has to be done only after you've already done what we are calling avodat hayom. So that's how Rabbi Akiva lays it out. He says, "Achar kach avodat hayom, yachar kach sir naseh b'chutz, shene'amar b'chulei, yachar kach elo ve'el ha'am." In other words, and now then I'm going to go and I'm going to continue on in the order that's brought in Achrei Mot. I have to do Elo ve'el ha'am, which is part of the Avodah of Yom HaKippurim. V'char kach emurei chatat, which is also mentioned in Achrei Mot. V'char kach tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. And after that, you're going to do tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. So just to look at Rashi again. So Rashi understood, this is how Rashi understands Rabbi Akiva. Parla b'shivat klasim tamid shel shachar. Rashi goes out of his way to make sure that we know where we are on my chart. And he says, Im tamid shel shachar bilvisha rishona, right? In the first time he's getting dressed. So he's going to be wearing the bigdei zahav. And why do we do these parts of the musaf with the tamid shel shachar? Shenemar b'musfei kol harigalim, because regarding all of the musafim for all of the regalim, it says milvad olata boker, right? That's the pasuk that's quoted in the Gemara. Alma, it teaches us that musafin in olata boker nasit b'samut lahem. That the general rule, the Torah is teaching us, this is the general rule, that musafin are done with the korban tamid shel boker, shel shachar. V'ilmod Yom Kippurim mehem, and we're going to learn Yom Kippur along with them. In other words, it should also apply to Yom Kippur. This is like a general rule that's being set up. It happens to be set up under Pesach, but it's applicable to all of the musafim. V'char kach avodat hayom, v'char kach sir naseh b'chutz. Afterwards, you do avodat hayom, which is the part the seir chatat that is specific to Yom Kippur. V'char kach sir naseh b'chutz, which is the last part of the musaf. The afal pi shehu mina musaf, Rashi says, lo yachol lahakdimo la'avodat hayom. You can't bring it prior to doing avodat hayom. Shene'amar bo usir chatat echad milvad chatat kippurim lamanu shesir chatat apnimi kdamo. That teaches us that the seir, Rashi says that the chatata kippurim, he understands it referred specifically to the seir chatat. Could be it's lav dafka because they're both chatat, and we have other instances where it says in singular, but it's actually referring to both of them. But it teaches us that in any event, I can't bring the seir naseh b'chutz of the musaf until I have finished bringing the chatat or the chataot of Yom Kippur. So these are all things that he's doing while he has already changed into the Bigdei Zahav for the second time on the third Tevilah. Yachar kach tamid shel bein ha'arbaim, and Rashi adds in b'tvilah chamishit. He does the tamid shel bein ha'arbaim with the fifth Tevilah, meaning that in between what was done right before the Emurei Chatat and Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim, he changed his clothes again, and he did a fourth Tevilah. He put on the Bigdei Lavan, and he took out the Kafu Machteh, right? And the Braita, Rabbi Akiva, doesn't mention that. So Rashi understands that this is nonetheless what he means, and he says that the Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim is after that, the Tvilah Chamishit, when he's already done the last Tvilah, V'lo Ayri Hacha B'hotzat Kafu Machteh. And it doesn't talk here about taking out the Kafu Machteh. Why? The Pshita Lan, the Batar Elo Ve'el Ha'ami. That's obvious. In other words, it's known, it's completely clear that he's, after he finishes the Elim, and the Haktata Imurin, then he's going to take out the Kafu Machteh. That has to be the next step. How do we know? Kedetanya lekaman, because we're going to learn in a Braita later, Shekol HaParasha Nemra al HaSeder, that the entire parsha was said in order except for, and you may remember we touched on this way, way back when we first learned Parshat Achremot, meaning except for Hotzat Kafu Machteh, which is the pasuk that pasuk Kav Gimel that talks about going into the Kodesh HaKodeshim and removing the Bidei Lavan. Right, so the Gemara is going to yet talk about that, but Rashi so I'm not going to explain it here. I'm going to wait for the Gemara to explain it further. But the point of Rashi is that Rashi wants to say that Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim is going to be done on the fifth Tvilah, the last time he's wearing the Bigdei Zahav. So once again, that's the difference between the way we read the Gemara initially, and we read the Gemara initially, apparently the way the Rambam reads it, where the actual Korban Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbaim is done in the third Tevilah. And Rashi says, no, it's in the fifth Tevilah, right? Just to keep it in mind. Let's go on now in the Gemara, because the Gemara wants to discuss the reasoning for Rabbi Eliezer and for as well as for Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva more or less gave us his reasoning. His reasoning is based on these two psukim of Milvad Alata Boker Sheli Alata Tamid, and the other one series in B'chan Chatat Milvad Chatat Kippurim. So Rabbi Akiva basically gave us his reasons. So those are pretty good reasons. What does Rabbi Eliezer have to say? What's the basis for him saying that the order shouldn't be like Rabbi Akiva? So my time at the Rabbi Eliezer, what's the reason behind Rabbi Eliezer? Avid kedichtiv, says he does it the way it's written. What does he mean the way it's written? Avid bereisha the Torat Kohanim, v'hadar avid chumash hapkudim. That the Torah introduces us to all this avodah first in Sefer Vayikra. So he does the avodah in the order that's brought in Sefer Vayikra. And afterwards, he'll do the avodah that's brought in Chumash HaPkudim, that's brought in Bamidbar. Torat Kohanim is what Chazal called Sefer Vayikra, not to be confused with what post Chazal called the Medrash Halacha on Sefer Vayikra, which we also call Torat Kohanim. Here, Torat Kohanim means Sefer Vayikra. So he does it as it's written. He does first the avodah that's in Vayikra, and then he does the avodah that's in Bamidbar. Let's look at Rashi on this for a minute. Avid kedichtiv, Torat Kohanim ktiva bereisha. Vayikra is written first. Hilkach elo ve'el ha'am ve'emurei chatat batar avodat hayom. So therefore, in the way it's brought down in Achrei Mot is first he's going to do Avodat Hayom. In other words, we're no longer talking now about we're focusing on the center and then either going up or down, right? The center is Avodat Hayom. It's the par and the seir hachatat. So Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, so he had to do the Tamid. I'm adding into Rashi here. He had to do the Tamid Shel Shachar first because he always has to do the Tamid Shel Shachar first. There's no question about that. So what about all the other things? So he says, okay, after that, I'm going to refer to Achrei Mot. In Achrei Mot, the next thing he'll do is Avodat Hayom. So Avodat Hayom is the par of the Sir Chatat. And then that he did in the Big Day Lavan. And then he's going to change clothes. He'll be in the Big Day Zahav. He'll do that after Avodat Hayom. He's going to do Elo ve'el ha'am ve'murei chatat. That has to be done after Avodat Hayom because that's the way it's brought down in the pasuk in Achrei Mot. V'hadar hotzat kaf v'machteh, because that's also the next thing in Achrei Mot. V'char kach musafin v'tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. And only then is he going to do Musaf and Tamid Shel Ben HaArbayim. So, because they are written at the end, in other words, they're written later in Bamidbar. So that's the Shita, that's how Rabbi Eliezer looks at it. Okay, except for the Korbanot Tamid, which are always the first and last things to do in the day, I'm going to go in the order that the Torah presented it. So the Torah gave me Achrei Mot first. So it means I'm going to do Parva Olah L'Chatat. That's Avodat, what we call Avodat Hayom. And then I'll do Elo ve'el ha'am ve'murei chatat, because that's the next thing in Parshat Achrei Mot. And then Hotzat Kaf U'Machteh, because that's the next thing in Achrei Mot. And then I'm going to go back, and then I'll go to the next part of the Torah, which is Bamidbar, and I'll do the Korbanot Musaf. So that's his reasoning. So that's also pretty good reasoning. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva kediktani ta'ama. So Rabbi Akiva, what's his reason? It's like he already gave his reason. Milvada lata boker sheli lata tamid. Alma, Musafinim Tamid Shel Shachar Avidu. Rabbi Akiva says, no, but I learn in Sefer Bamidbar that Musafin always come right after the Tamid Shel Shachar. So what does Rabbi Eliezer have to say about that pasuk? Milvada lata boker sheli lata tamid. That was one of Rabbi Akiva's main proof texts. So Rabbi Eliezer says, hi, milvad chatat kippurim. Rabbi Eliezer, hi, milvad. I'm sorry. Wait, just a second. Can you tiny timer? So that's Rabbi Akiva. That's Rabbi Akiva's reply to Rabbi Eliezer. He's saying, Rabbi Eliezer, you want to go everything in order, as it were, to do first Sefer Vayikra, then Sefer Bamidbar. But the pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar already tells me that that's not the case. But I have to do Musaf before I do Avodat Hayom. Rabbi Eliezer, I milvad chatat kippurim my abidle. But what about Rabbi Akiva's second proof text? Oh, and so wait, and what about? So that's Rabbi Akiva. That's how Rabbi Akiva answers. So let's just let's just put this together for a moment now. So Rabbi Eliezer is saying, I'm going to go in order. First Sefer Vayikra, then Sefer Bamidbar. Rabbi Akiva already said that Milvada lata boker shilata tamid tells me that I have to do Korban Musaf before I do Avodat Hayom. What does Rabbi Eliezer say about this pasuk? Milvada lata boker shilata tamid. That's where Rabbi Akiva learns that I do Musaf right after Tamid Shel Shachar. So we'll see this, I think Rashi says in a moment, but he'll simply say, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that drasha, because remember, Rabbi Akiva took that from the Musaf of Pesach and said it also applies to Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yezer could just say, I don't agree with that. That's not what it says. That's true for Pesach. It's not true for Yom Kippur. I don't have a special pasuk for Yom Kippur. So I'm just going to do it in the order that the Torah gave me. However, Rabbi Yezer is still going to have to answer for this other pasuk, Milvad Chatata Kippurim. So Milvad Chatata Kippurim told me that I had to wait on the Chatat of Musaf. I had to wait until after Avodat Hayom, because that seems to be what the Torah is saying. First, you have to bring Chatata Kippurim, and then you can bring this Sir Chatat of Musaf. So, Hai Milvad Chatata Kippurim, my Avid Le. What does he do with that? What does he do with that pasuk? So he says, Hahu Mibaile al Mashazeh Mechaper Zeh Mechaper. He needs that for a different drasha. And Milvad here doesn't mean, aside from having done this korban, but it means that aside from this other korban this chatat I bring on Yom Kippurim, I'm going to also do a chatat of Musaf, and they have something in common. That they both have something in common in terms of their power of their kapara. So let's look at Rashi, and to understand this a little better, let's look at Rashi. Then we have to look at the mission at the beginning of Masechet Shavuot. So Rashi says, "Hai milvad chatata kippurim." This pasuk of milvad chatata kippurim that Rabbi Akiva used as the proof text to tell me that I have to wait to bring the musaf of the chatat of the musaf until after I did avodat hayom. What does Rabbi Yezer do with that? Demashma desira chitzon kodem le'elo ve'el ha'am. That implies that the sira chitzon comes before the ayo ve'el ha'am. The sira chitzon is the musaf, which we call the sira naseh b'chutz. That once I say milvad chatat kippurim, that implies that that's going to come before Elo ve'el ha'am, by Avidle. What does Rabbi Eliezer do with that pasuk? Bishlama milvad alata boker lav b'yom kippurim ktiv. So Rashi's answering this question that I said. He says, okay, the Gemara isn't bothered that Rabbi Eliezer doesn't agree with Rabbi Akiva about his first drasha, Ilvad alato boker. That implies that the musaf has to come right after Korban Tamid. That's because Lav Yom Kippurim Ktiv. It's not, that pasuk isn't written about Yom Kippur. It's written about Pesach, or maybe about the Regalim. But me Regalim lo yalif. I don't learn out from the Regalim. Why? The Samicha Sidra l'me'avad hani the Torah kamani beresha, because Rabbi Yezer we already said for Rabbi Eliezer that what's his shita? He relies on the order that's in the Torah to do that which is in Vayikra first. Elahai de katav b'yom kippurim gufei my avidle. The second pasuk of Rabbi Akiva, Milvad Chatata Kippurim, that's in the Parsha of Yom Kippur. So Rabbi Yezer can't ignore it. He can't just say, oh, it doesn't apply. Obviously it applies. So why doesn't he agree with Rabbi Akiva about that drasha? So he says, no, I need that for something else. I need it for Alma Shezeh Mechaper Zeh Mechaper. Rashi explains, B'matnitin de Perek Kama de Shavuot, the Mishnah, in our Mishnah at the beginning of Shavuot, at the beginning of the first chapter, Darish Leihachi, the Mishnah itself brings this drasha. Bal sheyesh ba yediyah b'sof, ve'en ba yediyah b'tchila, sira naseh b'chutz b'chaper. שנאמר, אסיר חטאת אחד מלבד חטאת הכיפורים, על מה שזה מכפר, זה מכפר. מה פנימי אינו מכפר, אלא דבר שיש בידיעה, ומפרש הטעם, אף חיצון אינו מכפר. Okay, instead of me just simply trying to explain this to you, let me show you. If you have not learned, or have either not learned or have not recently reviewed Masechet Shavuot, let me refresh your memories. Yeah. Okay. Actually, before we look at the Mishnah, hold on. Before we look at the Mishnah, let me remind you of some psukim, which we're going to be reading very, very soon in Parshat Vayikra. So in the beginning of Perek Hey of Vayikra, we have a series of psukim, and they go as follows. Nefesh ki techta v'shama kol Allah, uhu eid o ra'au yadayim lo yagid v'nasa'u vono. So this is the mitzvah of what's going to be Shvuat Ha'edut, that there's a mitzvah. If somebody knows testimony about something, he has an obligation to testify. O nefesh asher tiga b'chol davar tamei, or somebody who touched any tamei thing, and then it gives examples, nivlat chaya tameya, or nivlat behema tameya, or nivlat sheretz tamei, so let's consider this for a moment. If somebody touched something that was tamei, whether it was a nevela of a chaya, or nevela of a behima, or nevela of a sheretz, and ne'elam mimenu, it became hidden from him, and he is tamei and ashem. So there are a couple, many questions here, but one of them is, what's the chait? Why there's no chait that we know of simply touching something that's tamei. So Chazal understood that what's the chait? The chait is that while he was tamei, either he entered into the mikdash or he ate something that was tahor. But ne'elam mimenu, it became hidden from him. So what became hidden from him? Yesh Lomar, at least one of the things that becomes hidden is the tumah. What does it imply? It became hidden from him. That there was a point in time that he knew he was tamei, and then it became hidden from him. And during that time that it was ne'elam mimenu, while he was tamei, either he went into the mikdash, or he ate something that was, or he ate kodashim that were tahor. Well, he ate kodashim, and that's his. So that's the chait. The chait is that while he was tamei, he was tamei mikdash or kodashim. But what's important here, and this is something exceptional in the Torah, that the Torah is implying that he knew that he became tamei, but then it was dafka ne'elam mimenu, and then he's tamei v'ashem.
Shel,
Yes.
where do you see that he is conscious of what happens? Because it seems to me that he doesn't even know about it.
So the diuk is v'ne'elam.
What does ne'elam mean here?
Ne'elam.
Today we know what ne'elam means, but what does it mean here?
So what it means, the way it's understood, ne'elam mimenu, is that ad kan haya galui lo, he did know, the ne'elam, and then afterwards it became ne'elam. So what's ne'elam? It means that he forgot, or somehow he became unconscious of the fact that he was tameh. But it indicates that there was a point in time that he knew. Ba'az ne'elam, like nishkach mimen. Actually, the Targum here, it says "V'yehei mechusam mineh," right? It became covered up from him, right? So the implication is that it's something that he knew, and that at some point in time he didn't know anymore.
That's an interpretation, because it could also be that he didn't know it in the first place.
Well, so I think, and I think I have to look in some of the other Mefarshim who are better at diktuk than I am, which is all of them basically. But I think the binyan of ne'alam is of what it's a nifal. It's implying that it's it has an implication of time, that ne'alam, after the fact, there was a fact, and then after the fact, ne'elam.
Forgot about it.
What's that? Yeah, he forgot
it.
Yeah, so the simple understanding would be that he forgot about it, right? He forgot about it, somehow became unconscious of it. Let's just read a little bit further. We don't have to go into detail on the rest of them, but just to get to a little bit further. Could also be that he became tameh b'tumat adam. O nefesh, and then it brings another subject. O nefesh ki tishava levatei b'sfatayim lahara o laitiv l'chol asher yivateh adam b'shvua v'ne'elam mimenu v'yadav v'yashem l'chat me'eleh. Okay, so the Torah here is bringing three different subjects. The first one is edut, the second one is tuma, and then the third one is shvua. So if he became guilty of one of these things, then he does a vidui for the chet. And what does he bring for the chet? He brings nikeva minatzon kisba usirat izim b'chatat. They said if he couldn't afford to bring the sheep, then right? So the korban chatat that he brings. This is what we call the korban olevi ored. Olevi ored. It goes up if he's rich. It goes down in price if he's poor. Right? And then it talks about how to bring them and so forth. So these three categories of halacha get grouped together.
There's still something. This means that he forgets about it, and later on he again remembers it, because if it doesn't come back to his memory, then he can't even do the korban, because he doesn't know about it.
Excellent. So that's exactly the point. So when does he bring a korban chatat? When he had yediyah betchila, the yediyah basof, v'helem benatayim. That's exactly the point. That's exactly how Chazal understood this case. It's a very specific case, and this is how now we can go and look and understand a little bit more at the beginning of the Mishnah here at the beginning of Shavuot, right? So the first Mishnah Shavuot goes like this. It goes Shavuot Shtaim Shehen Arba. When we talk about Shavuot, there's two kinds of Shavuot that break down into four. There's like two that are four. Yediyot HaTumah, knowledges of Tumah, are Shtaim Shehen Arba. And that's the case that we're going to focus on. And Yetziot HaShabbat Shtaim Shehen Arba, Marod Negaim Shtaim Shehen Arba. So we see the Mishnah here is lumping together things that in the mnemonic form of Chazal were listed in this way. They were categorized in this way, that there were two that become four. So the Mishnah, it skips over Shavuot and goes immediately into talking about Yediot HaTumah. It skips over Shavuot, and this is Masechet Shavuot, but it's going to first talk about Yediot HaTumah because most of the rest of the Masechet is going to deal with Shavuot, and because Yediot HaTumah is a relatively short topic, it's going to get that out of the way first. So Mishnah Bet says, Kol sheyesh ba yediyah betchila, v'yediyah basof, ve'elen bentayim, harei zeh ba'oleh v'yoreh. So that's what we just learned. Anything, meaning any time a person became tamei, with one of the tumot that's listed there in Vayikra, and he knew about it, he was conscious of the fact that he became tamei, and then he forgot. But then during the time that he forgot, he either walked into the mikdash or ate kodashim. And then at the end he had Yediyah Basof, and then he remembered, where somebody told him. And then he had Yediyah B'tchila, Yediyah Basof, Yalen Ben Atayim. So what's his din? He brings a korban chatat. He brings the olev yored, which we described. It's either the keves or it's going to be the torim or b'nei yonah. Yesh ba yediyah b'tchila. Now, so there the Torah tells him how to get kapara. He gets kapara by bringing korban olev yored. But now we've opened ourselves up to these other possibilities. What if he knew and forgot and he never remembered? Or what if he didn't know to begin with that he was tamei, and then it became known to him later on? So how does he get kapara for those? Yesh ba yediyah b'tchila, ve'en ba yediyah b'sof. What about a person who knew he became tamei, and then it was ne'elam mimenu, and he walked into the mikdash or ate kodshim, ve'en ba yediyah b'sof, and he never knew. It never came back to him that he was tamei at that time. So seir shenaseh bifnim v'yom kippurim toleh ad sheyivadalo yavi ba'olev yoreh. So this is exactly what the kapara of the seir naseh bifnim, the seir chatat la'am, which is part of the avodat hayom, Yom Kippurim, that's there to give him a suspended sentence, as it were. It suspends his kapara along with Yom HaKippurim itself, Atzmuto Shel Yom, Ad Sheyivadalo, until it would become known to him. And then once it becomes known to him that he was tamei at the time that he ate kodshim or walked into the mikdash, then he'll bring the korban olev yoreh. But in the meantime, this is toleh. What does it mean? It's toleh. It protects him from divine punishment. And what about the other case? Ein ba yediyah b'tchila. Maybe he never knew that he became tamei. Aval yesh ba yediyah b'sof. He didn't know at the time he became tamei, and then in that tamei state, he walked into the mikdash or ate kodshim, and then later on it became known. He realized only completely after the fact that he had been tamei at the time. So seir naseh b'chutz b'yom kippurim mechaper. So the seir naseh b'chutz that we're talking about now, the seir that is done as part of the korban musaf of Yom Kippur, that's to be mechaper along with Yom Kippur for this chait. Shenemar bilvad chatata kippurim. So what does it say in the pasuk there? Just the whole pasuk is seir yimachad chatat. So he's going to bring us the Korban Musaf. He'll bring us Yirizim Chatat, that's the Sirana Sebechut, aside from Chatata Kippurim. So aside from Chatata Kippurim, now we understand it in a different way. He's going to bring the Korban Chatat of the Sirana Sabi Bachutz, as well as the Sirana Sabi Fnim, because each of them have a part in this category of kapara. Al mashe zemechaper, that just as this one is mechaper, this one, right, the same thing that this one is mechaper, this is mechaper. So it's not precisely the same thing, but what's the thing they have in common? Mahapnimi, the sira nasa bifnim, ein mechaper, ela adavar sheyesh bo yediyah. The sira nasa bifnim is mechaper on something that has a yediyah. So the same thing that the Sir Nasa B'chutz is also mechaper al davar sheyesh bo yediyah. It's just that Sir Nasa B'fnim is the Sir Nasa B'fnim is for yediyah b'tchila ve'ein ba yediyah b'sof, and Sir Nasa B'chutz is ein ba yediyah b'tchila ve'yesh ba yediyah b'sof. So there are two ends of the same spectrum. And that's how, so Rabbi Eliezer then, our Rabbi Eliezer back in Yoma, that's how he understands the pasuk of Milvad Chatata Kippurim. It's to tell me that there's a relationship in terms of the kapara that comes along with the Siyana Sabifnim and the Siyana Sabachutz. And that's why the pasuk in Bamidbar links them together.
So these are some kind of second line korbanot, that if you didn't do the first line, so you have some kind of backup to protect you.
Exactly, right. That's in a way, that's a very good way of thinking about it, because the Torah lays out that yesh v'yediyah b'tchila, yesh v'yediyah b'sof, and then ben time, okay, you bring korban olevi already. But what about all the other cases? So we have at least three other cases. So we've discussed two. One is yediyah b'tchila ve'ein ba yediyah b'sof, and one is yesh v'yediyah b'sof ve'ein ba yediyah b'tchila. So we understand Sirana Sabifnim, Sirana Sabachutz, they're going to bring kapara or some measure of kapara for those. But what about, and then there's the third category, which is really the fourth category altogether. What about somebody who never knew, not in the beginning and not in the end? Al she'ein ba yediyah lo b'tchila v'lo b'sof, sirei harigalim u'sirei roshei chadashim mechaprim, divrei Rebbe Yehuda. That's exactly what the Sirei Regalim and the Sirei Rosh Chodesh are brought. They're brought to be mechaper for Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav for people who never knew that they were Tameh. Rabbi Shimon Omer Sirei HaRegalim mechaprim. All right, there's a machloket here. This is a three-way machloket. We don't have to get into it. It's not our immediate concern. They get into this interesting machloket about exactly which of the sirim are mechaper for which thing. But the main thing I wanted to point out is that we also have to consider how do you get kapara for things that you're completely unaware of in this Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashim. How can you ever get kapara? So now we understand that these are linked to the korbanot musaf, and then the one that's exceptional in a sense is the sira nasa bifnim, right? Because it's not technically a korban musaf; it's a special thing that you bring just on Yom Kippur. But nonetheless, okay. Let's go back to the Gemara. So now we understand Rashi, right? Now we understand the Gemara, and now we understand Rashi. So when the Gemara wanted to know Rabbi Eliezer, so you say that the Kohen Gadol, he should simply go in the order that the Torah presents these avodot. So he does the avodot in Vayikra, and then he does the avodot in Bamidbar. But what are you going to say over in Midbar, in Parshat Musafin? It says, Milvad Chatata Kippurim, when it talks about bringing the Siyar Naseh B'chutz, it says, Milvad Chatata Kippurim, which Rabbi Akiva says, that implies that first you have to do Chatata Kippurim. First you're going to have to do Avodat Hayom. And only then can you do Siyar Naseh B'chutz. So what do you do with that? So he says, "Ma'avid halavi ba'ilai." No, he needs that pasuk to teach him something else. It doesn't teach me about the chronological order of bringing the Siyar Naseh B'chutz and the Siyar Naseh B'fnim. It teaches me that they have a relationship in terms of their kapara. So at this point in the Gemara, we've looked at the Shita of Rabbi Akiva, we looked at the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, and we understand each of their proof texts. Each of them rely on different proof texts. And those are the charts that you have. You can look and see how they line up. Let's go on a little bit. Now, the next part, I debated about whether we should do or not, but I do want to do it because it's along the way to the rest of the sugya, and the rest of the sugya is very important to us. So this will get maybe a little bit confusing, but that's why I made the other charts. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmo, right? The Gemara goes on to say, Rabbi Yehuda says in his name, in other words, in the name of Rabbi Akiva, as we'll see, Echad Karevim Tamid Shashachar B'Shishan Tamid Shaben Ha'arbayim. One of them, one of the Shivat Kvasim of Musaf, is going to be brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar, and the other six are going to be brought with the Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbayim. So we had Rabbi Akiva, but now we're going to have two Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva who had different traditions in Rabbi Akiva. So in our Rabbi Akiva, the Shivat Kvasim were all brought together. But Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar, but Rabbi Shimon says, no, actually Rabbi Akiva split them up. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, the way he split them up is one of the Shivat Kvasim was brought with Tamid Shel Shachar, and the rest of the six were brought with Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbayim. And Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omer Mishma, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says in the name of Rabbi Akiva, Shisha Krevim, he says the other way around. Shisha Krevim Tamid Shel Shachar, V'echad Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbayim. Right. So that's how they split them up, and that's what we see. That's what I called number 7 and number 8. Rabbi Akiva Libid Rabbi Yehuda. So we see in Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he brings here kevis. He only brings one kevis of the musaf in the morning, and then Shisha Kvasim he brings in Tfilah Chamishit before he does the Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbayim. And according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, in the morning he brings Shisha Kvasim. And then he does the last keves of the Musaf with Tamid Shel Ben Ha'arbayim. That's their machloket. Of course, the Gemara wants to know what's the basis for their machloket. Maita Amayu de Rabbanan. What's the reason for these rabbis? What's these rabbis' reasoning? These rabbis being Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. So they say, Trei Krai Ktivi, the two psukim that are written, Ktiv, Milvad Alato Boker, Asher Alato Tamid, that Rabbi Akiva used, Uktiv, but it also says in Achraimot, V'yatza v'yasa et olato. He goes out and he does his olah v'yat olat ha'am. And those are and those seem to refer to the Elim. Just a second. Let's remind ourselves. here in Achremot. Here in Achremot, after the pasuk that Chazal understand to bring, where he goes in and takes out the kafu machteh, then it says Rechatzet b'saro b'mayim b'makom kadosh. He goes to the mikveh again, v'lavasha b'kadav, and he puts on the bigdei zahav. Yatsav yasa et olato v'yat olat ha'am. That's when it's then. So there it says he goes out and he does his olah and olat ha'am. Now, again, as I mentioned before, and including in the beginning of the shiur, what is olat tov, olat ha'am? Those are the elim, and one of the elim, the el ha'am, is identified with the ayel ha'olah, which is part of the korban musaf. So, what were Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon thinking? They're saying, okay, one pasuk says milvad olat boker, and that tells me that the korban musaf should be brought with olat hatamid. It should be brought with the tamid shel shachar. But I also have this pasuk v'yatzavi asayat olato, and what does that imply? That implies that the olah of at least one of the olot of musaf has to be brought later on, after he's already taken off the bigdei lavan for the second time. Hilkach avid minayu hacha uminayu hacha. So therefore, I'm going to split them up. We split up the korbanot musaf and we'll do some of them in the morning and some of them bein harabayim. Okay, so that's the basis for splitting the 7 kvasim into 1 and 6. Either you do 1 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon, or you do 6 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Okay, so why didn't they agree on which one you do when, how many you do when? But my kam yiflige. So what's the basis for the machloket then? So Rabbi Yehuda Savar, Rabbi Yehuda holds avid chad. In the morning, I'm only going to have him do 1 of the kvasim. Kedichtiv milvad olat aboker. So for one thing, olat aboker, possibly the diuk is because it's a singular, right? So he's only going to do 1 of them, but the hadar avid, but he has to do at least 1. The hadar avid avodat hayom, and then he'll do avodat hayom of Yom Kippur. Why? So why didn't I have him bring more though in the beginning? Dil mechush shechalish kohen gadol. I'm afraid if I have him do all 7, it'll weaken him, and he won't be able to complete avodat hayom. So that's how Rabbi Yehuda holds, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda says he should only do 1 of the sirim, or 1 of the kvasim in the morning. Then he'll do avodat hayom, and then later on he can finish up the other things. So I want to make sure he doesn't get too weak to do avodat hayom. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Sabar, kevan da'atchil, according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says no. Once he started avid shisha, he should do 6. Dilma pasha, because maybe otherwise he'll get negligent. He'll end up not doing all of them later. So it's better he gets most of them out of the way now. Dilagabe avodat hayom, and I'm not worried that he's going to get too weak to do avodat hayom, because dilagabe avodat hayom zarizu, he'll perk up for doing avodat hayom, because that's something he understands is very special. So Rashi explains, avid chad, he does 1, bilvad olat haboker, smoke miktzat musafim lo'at tamid. That's the proof text that we know, is to tell me that you have to do at least some of the musafin along with korban tamid shel shachar. So he'll do one, and then he'll do avodat hayom. Hadar avid avodat hayom. Di'amar et kol hamusafim yakrivim tamid shel shachar. He say he should bring all the musafim with tamid shel shachar. Dil mechalish v'lamatzilam me'avad avodat hayom. Maybe you'll be get too weak. You won't be able to do avodat hayom. V'hu ikar hakapara. Rashi emphasizes the main kapara for today is dependent on doing avodat hayom. And Rabbi Shimon says no. Once he starts, he does 6 because Dilma Pasha, maybe he's going to be negligent. Maybe he won't finish doing them. After he's finished Avodat Hayom. That you were worried, Dilma Chalish, Rabbi Yehuda, you were worried he was going to get weak. You don't have to worry about that. The Legabe Avodat Hayom Zarizu. He's going to be Zariz. Umachlif Koach. He'll renew his strength. He'll perk up when he has to do Avodat Hayom. V'kuhu Musafin Lo Avid. But even according to Rabbi Yezer, but Rabbi Shimon, he doesn't do all of the Musafin. The Torat Kohanim Kadim, because nonetheless, Sefer Vayikra does come first. You still have to take into account all the other things that we had to take into account before in terms of the order. Okay, so this is a bit of a digression with Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yozar, Rabbi Shimon. But to finish off for today, I'm just going to begin the next part. It says, "Kule alma mihat chad ayuhu." Nonetheless, everybody holds that the elha for the ayil only brings one ayil. In other words, he's going to bring 2 ayilim because one of them is ayil kohen, but one of them is the el ha'am. So we might have thought that he brings elo ve'el ha'am and an ayil of musaf. But we see so far, Bein le-Rebbe Eliezer, Bein le-Rebbe Akiva, and Bein le-Talmidei Rebbe Akiva, everybody holds that he's only going to bring one ayil for the Kimman. So who is that like? Rebbe. That holds like, they're holding like Rebbe, even though of course Rebbe comes later, but then Rebbe Akiva and Rebbe Eliezer, it means they hold like the shita that Rebbe expressed to us. The Tanya, we learn it a bright. So Rebbe Omer, Ayil Echad Ha'emur Kan, Hu Ha'emur B'chumash HaPkudim. The Ayil Echad that's mentioned here in Vayikra and Parshat Achrei Mot, that's the same one that's mentioned in Parshat Pinchas, in Sefer Bamidbar. Rabbi Yozar, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shnei Elim. No, they're 2 separate Elim. Echad ha'amur kan, ve'echad ha'amur b'chumash pekudim. That's his machokas with Rebbe. Mai ta'ama de Rebbe, dichtiv echad. What does Rebbe say? It's only one, because it says, he brings ayil echad. Rabbi Yozar, Rabbi Shimon, mai echad. He says, no, the echad there means something else. Yuchad shebedro, means to take the choice one from the flock. The Rebbe, nafkalei mimivchar derecha, he learns that from a different place. Rabbi Yozar, Rabbi Shimon, chad b'chovav, chad b'nava. All right, so that this next part we'll do a little bit more in depth next time. And I'm just going to skip ahead to the next part, and that's this. Kidesh yadav raglav. So this is going back to the Mishnah after he brought Elova El Ha'am and Haktarata Imurim and so forth. Then he goes to the mikveh again and puts on the Bigdei Lavan. Tanu Rabbanan. So the Braita says, Ba'aron Elo Moed. And that's the pasuk that it goes, that says, Ba'aron El Moed Ufashata Bigdei Habad. He removes the Bigdei Lavan, Asher Lavash B'vo Al Kodesh, that he wore coming into the Kodesh, meaning the Kodesh HaKodeshim. V'hini Chab Sham, and he leaves them there. Okay, so the Gemara says, Uvaron el Ohel Moed. Lama Huba. What is he coming for? So they say, Lotzi et kafa machter. He's coming there specifically to remove the kafa machter. Shekol parasha kula nemra al haseder. All of the parsha of Achrei Mod was said in order, chutz mi pasuk zeh, except for this one pasuk. So that's the main thing I want to get up to. We will spend a little bit of time on the part just before this, but this is the main thing we want to get up to. We want to understand how Chazal understood the order and why they thought that this one pasuk was out of order. What does that mean? And what did they make of it? So that's what we'll stop for today. So next week we won't meet. We shall have a Freilich and Purim. And I believe we will meet the following week. It's going to be close to the time that I'm coming back to the States, God willing. There's a chance I might have to postpone, but hopefully it'll work out. That's it for tonight.
Thank you. Good night and Purim Sameach.
Purim Sameach. And
Purim Sameach. Okay.
Kol Tov.